Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, founder, CEO of SaaStock. Delighted to be joined today by Steve Lurie, who's the USA Growth and Biz Dev at Appvizer and Chief Engagement Officer at B2B Rocks. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. And actually, we could flipping roles because I was on your live show. What was it, about 2 months ago, maybe 2-3 months ago, and I struggled. And apologies for the tech issues there to kind of get on to that live show. But yeah, pleased to have you join the SaaS Revolution Show today. So Steve, tell us for those that haven't met you before, haven't listened to your show, who you are. Who is Steve Lurie?
Okay. Well, listen, I'm old enough to have gray hair, so I've been working in technology or around technology pretty much my whole adult life. So that's around 30 years now. And I was really fortunate to grow up in the Bay Area near Silicon Valley at the time when everything was kicking off in technology. So our family was actually like a test family for the first Apple IIs and the first Ataris. And then I got to be around a lot of these different entrepreneurs early on. So that being said, having worked in the industry, having been around that, I've always been fascinated by technology and been kind of like a tech observer. So I kind of feel a little bit like a kind of a tech historian a little bit. So that's part of it. And then I've also had a really interesting experience, which is growing up there and then moving overseas and having lived and worked in France the last 20 years to see how the tech industry is kind of fertilizing and creating new offshoots. And I think that's one of the things I'm really excited about and something I wanted to talk about a little about today.
Awesome. What brought you to France, Steve?
Well, so I was working in tech in 2001 when September 11th hit. And so I was selling into the aviation industry, which was absolutely the worst place to be when September 11th hit. And so I got back to work and I'd gotten successful, gotten to my 6-figure salary in Austin, Texas, which was a great place to be in the early 2000s and late 1990s. And then I could see it was all coming to an end. And so it was kind of like go on to the next tech job in the US or go check out France and learn a new language with my wife, who was French at the time. And so I took a risk and never regretted it. So it's been learning a second language, living in a different culture, working with people with a different cultural background. It's just added a lot of different layers to how I see the world and just keeps my brain stimulated, which is, I think anyone who works in tech, they're kind of interested in keeping their brain stimulated.
Indeed. Or they certainly should be. And I see a skateboard behind you, Steve. Are you a skateboarder for those that are listening on audio?
I was a skateboarder. I'm an avid mountain biker, but I just don't fall as well as I used to. So now my skateboard stays up on the wall, and my mountain bike, I won't go anything over like 5 degrees of steepness now. So I'm just so good. But
yeah, I've never broken a bone in my life, but I feel like if I had any falls off a bike or a skateboard, which I don't go anywhere near these days, I would definitely probably be of bone breaking material. And I've had one big fall of a skateboard when I was a kid, where pretty much my whole face scraped off on the pavement. But luckily, it grew back, and here we are. But yeah, maybe that's why I guess skateboarding is not really like a thrill-seeking sport by any means, but anything dangerous these days, like I'm just kind of like not into. Like, keep it safe.
Well, and I have the huge advantage of being in France, where healthcare is relatively inexpensive and abundant, and I still don't advise it. Just no, I'm staying off. I'm taking it easy on wheels. I take it to go get my bakery, my boulangerie in the morning. That's part of my morning routine. But other than that's about it. No.
Very cool. Very good. So you're at Appvizer.
Yeah.
And so you're leading sort of USA growth and business development at Appvizer, as well as Appvizer acquired B2B Rocks, and you're the chief engagement officer. We'll get into that. But tell us a little bit about Appvizer. What do they do? What's the size of the company? Any metrics that you can share, kind of around that?
Sure. So Appvizer is a media platform. So it's an online media platform, and it's basically we do a lot of content around the SaaS industry, and we help our SaaS partners basically grow their business. So we create visibility for them, and additionally, they get leads by being referenced on our website. So you look at things like G2, where you can go to get reviews and see what companies are doing and compare different companies. Kind of a similar thing, but we're more content focused. So we generate a lot of content. So basically, you might there might be an article talking about different business challenges and then referencing 3 different software tools that can help for that. And so we're a little different from a lot of companies, which is historically we've been focused more on non-English markets. So for SaaS companies that are looking to grow in Europe, for example, in markets like German market or the French market or the Spanish market, or the Italian market, which are the 4 big markets here, they would work with someone like us to create additional visibility. And that's been really interesting because, one, there's no other person or group really focused on that niche. That's a unique niche, is the secondary languages. And the other thing, too, which has changed recently, which is how we build SaaS has changed. And how we build software and technology has changed, which is before we used to build a product. Like when I started in software, we built a product for the US market. We proved ourselves in the US market. And once we got successful enough, then we would look to go towards an international market and choose that international market carefully. But now what's happened with product-led growth is people are building a product that from day one very much is ready from like an infrastructure standpoint, thanks to cloud services, and a security standpoint, and all these different ways to go internet and payment systems. They can strap all this stuff together and put their value add on top. And so they're ready to go international much earlier. The question is does their value proposition merit it? And increasingly, it does. And so a lot of companies are European companies are looking to get to the US earlier, and a lot of US companies or North American companies are looking to get to Europe earlier. So that's kind of like every other thing that's happening in our industry, everything's accelerating. And there's more possibilities. And now if you add the second layer to that, which is we can now hire remote employees more easily than ever before, and talent is finding fewer barriers. There's just fewer barriers to hiring people. It's just an exciting time. And so they brought me on to help the company and with the US market. And we kind of got sidetracked on B2B Rocks, which I think we'll get to in a second, but we'll talk about that.
Thanks for sharing that. So Appvizer, media company, helps SaaS companies get awareness, normally in secondary markets, usually through content. What is the revenue model there? And how do you measure success for the customers? So how do they come back to you and say, Steve, great campaign, we got leads, or we got, what are they looking at?
Yeah. Well, the term, it's funny, I was just thinking about it right before our show, and I think the term that encapsulates what we do, and it's always dangerous to coin a term yourself when no one else has heard of it. I call it content-led growth. So, we know that, a lot of companies use SEO and content to drive awareness about their products. And that's very much similar to our model, which is we're doing that. But it's actually more interesting to have a third party write about you than to write about yourself. So that's kind of our model, and it's a paid for content model. And then people, it's not hard to think. People measure that by leads. Typically, they're like, how many leads did this thing generate out of there? So that's what it all boils down to. But we're very much complementary to increasingly companies are. I've really noticed that most companies now are really focused on having their own strong content strategy in-house or by using external people. But they're doing something up on their website, on their blogs or video to drive interest in their products. But then typically they're using secondary tools like Google Ads or LinkedIn or something like that. So we're very much complementary in there. We would be another piece that fits right in there. And it's just another way to diversify that. And it's really simple. If they're not happy with the results, they typically don't come back.
Yeah.
And so we've been in business now for, I think, 8 years, something like that. We're around 50 people. Full-time people, and we keep growing, and now we are increasingly seeing interest from companies who want to focus on the US market as well, which is good for us.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And so it was at 8 years old, same age as SaaStock, and I didn't know that, but so you acquired, or Appvizer acquired B2B Rocks 2 years ago, because the first one was last year, right? Obviously, because of COVID, it kind of tell me a little bit more. Like, what was B2B Rocks? Why did Appvizer acquire it? And tell us a little bit about the first experience. So you mentioned there's another one kind of coming up, but And then also, I know there's a lot of questions then, like why would SaaS companies or media companies, buy, events and communities?
Yeah, so, it's funny. So SaaS is an international business sector now, right? So we see there's offshoots of this, something that started 20, 30 years ago. Well, let me go back. Let me go back with B2B Rocks maybe a little bit. Let me start with that. So B2B Rocks was started about 10 years ago by a guy named Alex Theuma, who was a venture capitalist here in France and kind of, I think he's in Paris. Mm-hmm. And it was really started as kind of a meet and greet networking event. And then it grew and it started developing an international focus with Australia and other countries. Like our biggest audiences are France, Australia, and England, but we very much have an international audience. Our last event, we had like people from 30 countries, which considering it was the south of France is really good. And then so Appvizer bought B2B Rocks 2 years ago, something like that. I'm like you, I'm not very good on dates either. I can kind of remember my wife's our anniversary and birthdays, so that's good for me. But something around 2 years ago, and then we kind of shifted the focus, and what our goal is to make it more international, and really to make it like we think that SaaS and technology is a really unique thing. And it's unique for so many reasons. One, it's rare to see an industry that's evolved so quickly and with so many talented people. And then also what's happening is that there's kind of a culture of people with the same mindset that are developing around the world, independent of race, religion, sex, what have you. And these people look at problems the same way. And they have common like reference points for dealing with things. And we think this is really an important thing. And because it takes kind of local people to solve local problems. It's hard for a guy like me, I have somewhat of a multicultural background, but for me to go into a place like Africa and create a great banking app for Africa. So these concepts like of teaching these skills and these ways of thinking and then this spreading out around the world is really powerful. And to give you an idea of how powerful this is, in France, which is historically not a very entrepreneurial culture, this year we saw that there was more startups per capita done in France than in other countries. And so increasingly, like that's changing even French culture to be more entrepreneurial as well. So this is really an important thing. So we bought the brand, we kind of shifted the brand, we rebranded it a little bit and focused more on the international, focused more on supporting that. And then but we really align with, we just want to support SaaS growth. And that's good for us. It's good for our industry. It's good for Appvizer. And it's also really a lot of fun. I mean, there's not an industry where you can meet so many intelligent people like that. And then we did, last year we did a lot of content around this. We did some really innovative content. And they told me to come up with the ideas. And I suggested really off the wall things. And they actually went for it, which shocked me. They're like, yeah, let's do that. And I felt like a little bit like a mad scientist. We were doing like asking people what their favorite rock song is, since our name is B2B Rocks, and putting that in like our, quick facts thing and really interesting content and more video focused content. And then we did our event, which we did in the south of France in Montpellier. And yeah, just for some context for the audience, Montpellier is kind of like a regional tech hub in the south of France. There's what we call the banana belt that strings from Italy all the way from France, southern France, into Spain. And Montpellier is a big part of that. But it's unheard of to have an event of that size outside of Paris in France. So we had over 2,000 people from 30 countries. It was a 2-day event. I had a lot of fun. I got a terrific sunburn, which took me about 3 days or maybe a week to recover from. And so that's what we did there. And we're going to be doing the event again this year. So we'll be doing the event this year. We're going back to Paris. So September 21st in Paris at Station F.
Yep.
And so the event will be back on, and we're really looking forward to that and getting ready and starting to spin up all the machine to get that going.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing that there. And yeah, actually with the positioning of Appvizer, you talk about the international content element. It makes sense now because I was at B2B Rocks, lucky enough to have spoken there, and I did notice that there was a lot of like panels and even like the video content with various different countries, like Middle East or Brazil and so on. And at the time, I didn't quite know necessarily why, but now I definitely get it. So strategic makes sense. And so was the sunburn and the outdoor factor any factor in moving back to Paris, or just is it just kind of obvious thing like you need to be in Paris and there's a reason that there are no events in Paris?
Yeah, it really just came up to Station F and a lot of different associations and government bodies in Paris pushed us towards Paris. And so, we rented the giant like Moss, like the country farm estate where we were at last time. It was a really interesting event because you were talking and there were horses. You could look out to your right and left and see horses at B2B Rocks. It was pretty relaxing. It was very different from most tech events, and a lot of people liked it, that kind of thing. But we've gotten a lot of people just pushing us towards Paris, and so we won't have to rent. They're going to offer up Station F free, which is I think it's free. I'm not sure about that. I have to check that.
Okay.
But in any case, we've gotten some advantages to going back to Paris, and so we'll be doing it there this year.
Good stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, I know that today we wanted to talk about and that there has been a lot of talk in the last 2 quarters, I would say, and continues about the headwinds that tech and SaaS, is facing. And in some respects, you see a lot of social media or written content where it's painted in a kind of a negative light, right? I mean, a recession is kind of, the connotations are quite negative, and layoffs and so on, and all the challenges that we're kind of facing. But you yourself, as you told me today, you're excited actually about this in a way. I'm sure you'll get the context. So, and you see opportunities within this. So we kind of want to dig into that. So tell me a little bit, and obviously a comment on the excitement or the level of excitement about having headwinds and what you think the opportunities are and why. Yeah,
I guess first of all, I don't want to underestimate the human cost. I mean, when people lose their jobs, that's always a traumatic experience, and so that's not fun. And so to all those people out there, take that. All this should be taken with a grain of salt. But I guess the point is that there's a movie I know called Being There, and the guy is a bit of a simpleton, the protagonist, and he always talks about how life is like a garden. So you have spring, then summer, then fall, then winter, and you have to cut back the plants so that things regrow better. And so when you cut back a plant, an offshoot on a plant, often more buds will sprout from that same thing. And I just wanted to provide a little bit historical perspective on this, which is, having been around tech an awful long time, I was working in the industry like when the .bomb event happened. So, I mean, there were like petfood.com, which was a company with no business model. I mean, selling pet food, it's just, why would I order it online and pay delivery charges when I could just pick it up at the grocery store? It just wasn't a very well out thing. There was other things, drcoop.com. There were more serious technical companies like Aether Technology or Aether Systems, which ran through 200 million, which never had a workable business idea. And what we saw after that is that there was a rapid maturing of the internet and these people. And the first thing people said was, what's your business model? How are you going to make money? And then much the same thing happened in 2002 and 2003. So we had a recession there. I think it was 2002, 2003. Yeah, okay, that was one recession. And there was also 2008 and 2009. So each time we've seen these deep recessions in our industries where people have cut back and where investment has been cut back. Well, what we see each time is there's been a rapid maturation of our industry. And I guess what's really impressed me about our industry now, especially SaaS, is I think like the people I'm talking to are remarkably sophisticated. And then so what we're seeing is like just the focus on details. And then there's all these other things that are happening. So, there's talent. So as I was mentioning, it's now a worldwide culture. So we see talent around the world. And so there's a lot of cross-fertilization. Like there's a lot of Indians that like spun out of Soho that then went back to the US and started companies there. Then there's people from the US that went back to India and like in Chennai now are starting companies in Chennai. So there's also this cross-fertilization that's happening. And this happened in a really short time of 20 to 30 years. And not only that, but now what we're seeing is the funding is maturing. So earlier, most of the funding, most of the VC groups were in the US. Now we see that, for example, Great Britain has a huge, of course, Great Britain has always been strong in finance in general, but there's a huge funding arms in Great Britain. Increasingly on the European continent, that's the same. Israel, Northern Europe, there's no region now that really doesn't have capital. And the breadth of that capital is extending. Whereas like before, there were only like a few funds in the world that could maybe do unicorn rounds. Now, increasingly, there's more and more funds that are doing unicorn rounds. And we've gotten to the point where the funding is so much that we talk about dry powder, that there's a lot of companies sitting on dry powder. And I think one of the things we're going to see about this, how things are going to shift, is I think there's going to be more startups coming. I think it's like, people are going to look to now vertically integrate more of the model instead of always going out and finding startups. It's kind of like before we were like more of a pharmaceutical model where we're waiting to get through and like, oh, they get through and then we fund it. And I think people are going to focus more on the front end of the funnel now because there's a dearth of opportunities for people to put their money. And what's interesting about this is people are being laid off right now. Some of these people have made money. Many of them have added tremendous skills. A lot of these people now are going to go start their own companies. So there's this shift in this perspective where we used to talk about minimum viable product, but now increasingly we're talking about minimum viable markets. Because with things like no code and low code, a couple people can get together and create a solution that can serve a niche problem, that can be a very important, lucrative niche problem in a smaller market, and create a lot of value for those people and that industry and disrupt that industry. So I think it's really an exciting time. And then you add things like machine learning, AI on top of that. So I think this may be actually, we always say one door shuts, another one opens. And I've always been a firm believer in this industry, having watched it over 30 years, it's always proven out. And so I'm kind of really excited about it. I wish I were a little younger so I'd get to appreciate it, but I'm trying to train my oldest son to become an entrepreneur. I'm trying to push him in that direction. So we'll cross our fingers and hopefully that'll work out.
Good stuff. I wonder there actually, and I'm sure it's the case, that how many people either in tech or, entrepreneurs actually become, I don't know, like tiger mums, where, for their kids to try and push them to become entrepreneurs, as well, just as a side note. But to some of your points, yes. So, and thinking about those that are listening, so like if you're a SaaS founder, a SaaS company, this is an opportunity in what we're seeing in the market that people are cutting the stems of their plants, the plants being, the companies, and, looking at how to be more efficient, across everything, across spend, across the team, getting, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, rid of, poor performers, and being forced to kind of really look at the business and see, like, what do we really need here? Maximum efficiency, I think is what's needed, at this time. And that's the opportunity, for the SaaS companies to really, focus on having this maximum efficiency and then grow back stronger to that maturation, as you say. And I saw a tweet, I think to your point a little bit about the Zoho side of things and also those that have been laid off. And I can't remember, I was speaking about it the other week, but I saw a tweet, I think today, from Nick Franklin from Chart Mogul. And I think he mentioned something about, it's a bit of a joke, but there's some seriousness in it that, Chart Mogul's growth strategy this year is that hoping that all the people that are laid off will start up a business, a SaaS business, and start to use Chart Mogul and you'll see many new SaaS startups, created with all the people that are, now in the market and thinking about what do we do as the kind of the next move. So I think we will certainly see that new wave of SaaS companies, and as you say, with the investors, especially in the early stage, they've got a lot of capital to deploy, and maybe it's a good time to start a SaaS business, potentially better than ever. So looking at it from that positive side of things.
Well, that's actually that would be a devilishly smart idea. Like if you're someone like Salesforce.com and you're going to be laying off your people, and Salesforce.com, they could give access to their platform to the people they're going to be laying off. And then they also have their own application development environment and cloud environment. And, they could give people, like a year's free credits to go build a business there. Like, hey, if you worked with us and this ecosystem and you want to, take your hand, it's not a bad idea. We often see people that work at one company, they create a company that works well with that company and plays off of that. So that's a really interesting idea.
We'll see after this podcast if there is a wave of companies going out with offers to those that are on the market, similar like when COVID was happening, that kind of the first year, that there were all these kind of offers to companies that were kind of struggling and reductions in pricing and so on, and everybody was kind of doing it. Maybe there'll be something similar here where we'll take the credit for, but via Nick from Chart Mogul.
I want the credit for content-led growth. That term I just came up. But, I saw at SaaStock this year when I was there, and by the way, that was a great event in Dublin. And the thing that I was really aware of is that there was already a focus on getting back to basics. A lot of people were really focused on the focus on core metrics like your customer acquisition costs, your total lifetime value. Just people were laser focused on that. I think the other thing that was really impressive is that the focus on bootstrapping and alternative financing. People wanted to maintain control of their business because I think there was a lot of reasons. There's one, they want the payout at the end if they're going to be putting in the sacrifice, but also I think they feel like the more control they have, the fewer distractions they have. It takes a lot of time and energy to get engaged with venture capitalists. And so there was that aspect. So people really... Already there was a certain urgency and focus on that. And then I think now that we're seeing these headwinds, that's only doubled and redoubled down. So I think it's a really interesting thing. And So the other thing I was expecting to say, I had a few predictions that I made earlier on. I said we'd see more M&A activity and more startups. Mm-hmm. And we have seen more M&A activity, and but financing is off for the bigger things. So the bigger things are off. And I think for me, if you're in this sector, I think going back and starting a company, it's a really good time. If you're kind of a down cycle on the heavy financing and the big IPOs and that stuff, go back time to focus on that. And it's never been a better time to be focusing on these basics.
Good stuff. A quick question about SaaStock. I'll throw it in there. You mentioned, what was your favorite thing about the conference last year, if you had one?
Well, I had never been to Dublin before.
You liked it?
So I love Dublin. And I realized that the Irish are natural marketers because they're just natural storytellers. Mm-hmm. So they've just got a good story for everything. I'm not sure their history is any richer than anybody else's, but they tell such a good yarn or crack, I guess as they call it. There. Yeah. And so that was definitely one of the things. And I've found Dublin to be a really dynamic city as far as startup and entrepreneur. I wasn't expecting that, but I didn't know anything much about it, but I just expected it to be kind of a backwater thing. I just don't think of Ireland like that there. Yeah. And then I think at the event, I think I got to participate in some of the events, or in some of the panels, or one panel, I think it was. And I think it was really interesting to participate in a panel and really engage with people. I think that's the thing that's event is we're in an industry that moves so fast and we all spend so much time in front of screens. And then when we're not in front of screens, we're in front of screens trying to educate ourselves and improve our skill sets. And I think what we fail to appreciate sometimes is that it's still a very human industry. It's an industry that's driven by personalities. by narratives about powerful people. And I think when you go and meet some of these people, it's important to meet them, ping them with questions. And I also think that there's a networking aspect, and there's also a demystification aspect, which is you're like, yeah, okay, he was really successful, but I don't see him as being head and shoulders. I don't see why I couldn't do some of those same things. And so I think those events are, I think the events in a digital industry, I think human events are just really important.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had the same experience at B2B Rocks. Last year was the same thing, which was all these people that I had met digitally, or I was, LinkedIn acquainted with over LinkedIn. I got a chance to meet them. And with some of them, I was even able to spend a little bit of time, although not too much because I was very busy. You know about that. And it's just such a great experience. And there's, these people for me, I think are the people of our industry are just really stimulating. So that's the part I like, I guess, is the people the most. Yep. So,
I mean, yeah, 100% the same. Like, I have the benefit through my job the same as you, obviously organizing, the conference. We do other things through the year, founder retreats and, even some virtual stuff. But certainly when we're in person, I like that the most. And just hanging around with entrepreneurs in person, like, it's pretty cool. And that's my job, and like, I like it.
Exactly.
I get to hang out with cool people.
I get paid for this.
I learn things. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I get like, it's only a small bit of grief, like at home, that it's like, oh, I was in the Amalfi Coast for 2 days, hosting 30 founders, and had a good time, but it was work. And then at home, I've got to be careful about what I can say, like around that, because because sometimes it just looks like I'm out for a jolly, right? And it's not the case. I'm just having fun, but with work. And so I feel like I've got, for me, the greatest job in the world. If you love what you do, then that massively helps, right? So,
just a quick anecdote. The other event I've done similar to SaaStock and B2B Rocks is, of course, SaaStock, which is well known. And the thing I don't like about that is the last time I went there, I think it was in Cupertino or someplace in the South Bay. And when you get to the parking lot, it is a sea of white Teslas.
San Mateo,
It's a sea of white Teslas. And so I kind of like the fact that it's in town and you don't see quite so many white Teslas. I love Tesla, great brand, but that's
not white ones. It was also a sea of white tents, and I think somebody called it COVID chic. But, anyway, moving swiftly on.
Yes.
We got in the quick fire rounds.
Okay.
Time. So what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
Mentors. I wish I had some great mentors. I wish I'd had more. I wish I'd had more time with them, and I wish I'd stayed with them longer.
It's a hard thing. Like, how do you get mentors? Like, if somebody's looking for a mentor, how do you go about it? Because it's not easy, right?
No, it's really not. And I think as men, we're fortunate in that professionally, I think because there's more men in our industry, we tend to maybe bond with men, and so we get some mentoring through other men. And I think that's one of the things that have held back women in our industry is that it's hard to find a woman mentor, and not necessarily that they need one. But I don't know, and I think that's a really important aspect, and it's something as a manager, I've always tried to just encourage people and tell them, like, and tried to mentor people. But I was very fortunate early on. I'm going to give a shout out to this guy. His name is Mike Lose. He was my CTO very early on. Brilliant guy. Also, in addition to a CTO, great sales mind as well. Great sales engineer, because you have to do everything when you're early in the tech. And he kind of took me under his wing a little bit and just, said, slow down, little bull. Let's walk down the hill instead of running down the hill. And he was just great. And I wish I'd had more people like him and more time with people like him over my career.
Best advice you ever received?
Listen. I think I started out my career as a salesperson. And so I'm a natural speaker. I can fill up any room. I can project my voice across the room easily. Best skill you can have is listening, and really actively listening. Showing people you're interested in what they're saying. I can't tell you how many salespeople, even really experienced salespeople, I've seen going into a sales pitch without understanding what the customers or the prospects' needs are, or what their pain is, or even why they're talking to them today or listening to them today. So I just think listening is probably the most underappreciated, underpracticed skill in every industry, but especially in our industry, it's critically important.
Biggest failure you've made and lesson learned from that?
I think be judicious in companies you choose. Be judicious in companies you want, cultures you want to be a part of. I think early on, I really wanted to work in tech, and I was willing to work for any company in technology. And sometimes I put title over company culture. And it's not your what you want to look about is the management. Can this company really be successful? Do they have the things in place here? How does this fit into the big thing? And really just prize culture over a title or pay. Don't the short term, just sometimes it doesn't always pan out.
Next question is, what does your daily routine look like? I know you go to the boulangerie in the morning. What do you get there? And what does the rest of the day look like?
So, yeah, I actually don't eat much bread in the morning, but my wife insists that I go get bread in the morning, which right now it's pretty cold in France. So that's tough. So I go out there, then I have my coffee, and then I walk my dog. I'm very fortunate to have a park next door, and I have a little Shiba Inu. So we spend a few minutes walking in the park. I think it's really important to reconnect to nature as much as possible. Again, working in a digital industry. And then really kind of fortunate, I work about 3/4 of the time because I also have an aged parent that I care for. So my days are actually pretty light as far as workload. And I also live in the south of France, which compared to an American job is almost being partially retired. So light workload and lots of networking and talking with people. And I'm really fortunate. They call me at Appvizer and B2B Rocks, they called me their free electron. And so they're like, anything they're like not sure about, or they need someone who's kind of a thinker to think about, they give it to me to think about. And so the notion of work, of producing something all the time, isn't a requisite for that job. But what they want is something in the end which they find useful and impactful. And so that's a really good job. So we have a great working relationship. I've never had anyone prize me for that before. And I think we all have a unique skill set. And, I've read thousands of books on marketing, sales, business strategy, Sun Tzu. I mean, I read the canons. And I also have a background in literature and Greek and Roman history and all these things. And so I look at things and sometimes can bring a perspective that very few other people, and especially young people, can bring to that, especially if they've only studied sales or marketing or have a technical background.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Steve, we come to the end of the show. If people that are listening, if they want to find you online, they want to watch your own show.
Yeah.
Where can they find you? Time to kind of drop that in.
Okay. So we're on LinkedIn. So my name is Stephen Lurie. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me on there easy enough. Our group, again, our community is called B2B Rocks. Again, we're on LinkedIn. And then we tend to live stream on Twitch and LinkedIn. So you can come there. And right now we're on hiatus, and we should be back in a couple of weeks. Cool.
Good stuff. Steve, been great speaking to you. Thanks for being a guest on the SaaS Revolution Show. No doubt we'll see you at B2B Rocks and at SaaStock again this year. And yeah, really enjoyed it. And thanks for being a great guest.
Thank you so much.